Hey everyone, my name is Tegan and welcome back to TandeWrites, where today we're going to be doing a tier list of my favourite reads of all time. I put together my top reads from the past 5 years, from 2019 to 2024, which are the years that I was actively making an effort to use Goodreads and track my reading, and we're going to see if any of them still hold up. 2019, 2021, 22, 23... Actually 6 years. So that is 30 reads total. This might be a long one. First, I will introduce you to my tiers. At the top we have books of all time, which I've kind of talked about in videos recently, which are like my Roman Empire reads, the books I think about constantly, the books that cause like a seismic shift in my personality. Second tier is I think about it often. Again, books that come to me maybe once a week. I think about a book, I think about it fondly. If I read it now, I would probably still love it, and it would probably end up on my top reads of the year list again. But it's not one that consumes my everyday life, and it hasn't like changed me as much as books of all time. In the middle we have 4 stars, which is books that I loved then. I might not love as much now, but they'll still be 4 stars, rated pretty highly, and I can understand why I liked them so much in the past. Down below that we have Better at 17, which is, I've read some of these recently, or reread some of them recently, where they're books that absolutely changed my life at 17, but if I read them now, they'll get like a 3.5 star rating. Not as, fundamentally life-changing to me as an almost 24-year-old, but at 17, definitely yes. And the bottom tier is the Did I Read This tier, because none of these books are particularly bad or I don't enjoy, because they were my favourite reads of all time for each year, but some of them that I just have no memory reading, no memory what they're about, couldn't tell you why I liked them, but not because I would find them bad now. I'd probably still enjoy a lot of them now, I just remember nothing about it. Okay, so 30 books. Hopefully I don't remember enough about any of them to start monologuing for 10 minutes per book, but this might be a long one. Let's begin. So first up, in 2019, I was 18 years old, for reference. I went into my first year of uni at the end of 2019. This was, a very vulnerable time in my life. My first favourite read from this time was Coraline. I distinctly remember reading it curled up in my uni bed, and why did I read Coraline? As a child, I had a horrific fear of Coraline. I saw the trailer, I saw the buttons for eyes, and I've had intrusive thoughts of sewing things into my eyes ever since. Some kind of purely obsessional OCD. Thank you, Neil Gaiman. There's not a lot we can be thanking Neil Gaiman for recently. So I refused to watch the film my entire child, teen, and most of my adult life, because I was absolutely terrified of it, or the thought of it. And then I think also around 2019 is when I got Libby. I got my library card and finally realised that I could connect to the library app and read ebooks. And just the whole world opened up for me. And I thought, I'm going to read Coraline because surely just reading it isn't going to be as scary to me as seeing it. And I loved this book. It's mostly a testament of giving kids mostly adult subject matter and not dumbing it down for them. Having the language that conveys them in a way that makes sense and it can still be scary but kind of child appropriate. And this is an example of a middle grade novel that I would be deeply inspired by if I wrote my own. This is... Do I think about it often? Because around this time I found out that if you go on BBC iPlayer, every month or so they have a different film selection on there. They had Coraline on there for a while, and I did finally watch it. Thankfully not as scary to me at the time 19 as it was to me at a younger age. Still think about sewing things into my eyes. I'm going to give it 4 stars. Because I did greatly enjoy it. I don't think about it often. I don't think about the book often. I think about the button eyes concept often, and not in a fun, positive, complimentary way. I think you can also tell how much I like some of these books by if they've made an appearance on the shelves behind me. So up next we have Autobiography, which is it this one here? This one here. And what do I think about Autobiography? I remember, was it some Mormonism in it? They were writing a book. It was probably the first gay book I'd read. Not because I'd only just seriously got into reading before then. I was just exclusively reading Vampire Diaries, My Beloved, what was my Harry Potter. I was reading just literally Hunger Games version, the big hitters in the books. So I got my library app and I finally branched out into other books. I was this is my first major gay book. Is it that gay? Can't remember. Don't think so. But I don't really remember anything about it. I remember loving it and it changing my life at the time. So maybe it was better when I was 17, even though I was 18. But honestly, did I read this? I'm going to reread it soon because I think vaguely in the distant part of my brain, I think some of it might be relevant to a book I'm writing now, but couldn't actually tell you. Next up we have The Wicker King, and can you even see? Oh, it's right in the corners. My shelves are arranged alphabetically, so K and Crumb is like cropped up in the corner up here. This is our first contender into books of all time, books that changed my life, books that have, this one literally caused a seismic shift in my personality. It introduced me to Kay Crumb, and she is the author of all time for me. Like, you meet your soul author sometimes, and she is that for me. Everything she writes hits me on a deeper level. And she's also very lovely to me on Twitter, which is always a win. But The Wicker King changed my life, and a lot of some elements of it inspired my book Paper Forests. So it's always nice when you love things that they inspire you to create something yourself. That whole love to the point of invention quote. Next up we had The Boy Who Steals Houses by C.G. Drews, and you may notice there is 1, 2, 3 C.G. Drews books on here, which is The Boy Who Steals Houses, the Patreon exclusive sequel to The Boy Who Steals Houses, and then their debut horror novel, which is, these are all very different on this tier list. But The Boy Who Steals Houses, their first 2 books were like these YA contemporaries. They're still, I think they're hidden in like this corner, or they're in like one of these shelves hidden right in the corner. And here are the characters from The Boy Who Steals Houses. So the book had a big impact on my life. I don't think I loved it as much as their debut novel, A Thousand Perfect Notes. I don't think I loved it as much as the sequel, Kings of Nowhere. And then I don't think I loved it as much as Don't Let the Forest In, but I enjoyed these books for so many varied different reasons that I can't really compare them. But I have reread this one recently. I did give it 4 stars. I don't think about it as often as the other books in the series, and I don't think about it as often as other C.G. Drews works, but I still love it and hold it very dear to me. Next up we have Vicious by V.E. Schwab, and was, a seismic shift to my life at the time. I probably still do think about it often. No, I don't think about it often. Because V.E. Schwab is another one of its sole authors for me. There's pretty much this entire top shelf, from literally here onwards, is V.E. Schwab, and actually life-changing to me. Vicious, loved it, loved the sequel, very excited for when the 3rd book has more information coming out, but didn't change my life as much as a majority of other V.E. Schwab books. Like, I am the #1 Gallant stan. I've recently read the Monsters of Verity duology, and that has changed my life. Addie LaRue, obviously, absolutely seismic shift for everyone who read it. And A Darker Shade of Magic. And I really loved The Near Witch, but I really love every V.E. Schwab book. I just don't rank this one, although giving it 4 stars, don't rank it as highly as the other ones. Hold Back the Tide by, is that Melinda Salisbury? Maybe. This book has had an impact enough on my life that has inspired some moments in my book Paper Forests, but I'm going to say Better at 17, because I think this was probably one of the first books I read in this specific YA kind of dark fantasy. Has it got like a folklore vibe? But yeah, it was the first in a genre for me, and I've just read so many in this niche genre since. I don't think it holds up to as much as I did love it at, I think I read this in 2020, so 19. But I probably still really love it, but nowhere near as much as I did when I read it for the first time. Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. I think about it often. Fun fact, I was an ARC reader for the sequel, and that book has changed my life. It was originally, when I first made this tier list, I had my top 10 for each year, but that was just far too many books to get through. And the sequel probably might creep into books of all time, but I think if I reread it, it would not be books of all time. These are literally right in the corner up here. I love them enough to own them. This book, when I read it, I thought about it for days after. It was something about this YA, it's not really contemporary, it's kind of, I don't remember what decade it's set in, but it's not the current one. It's something about the softness and the light amongst the dark between these 2 boys really hit me, and I do think about it often. And I'm desperately trying to work out if I can watch the film anywhere. Hit me up if you know. Circe by Madeline Miller goes into I think about it often as well. What are the Madeline Miller options? Song of Achilles, Circe, and the Galatea short story which I love because it's like a niche myth or myth element that I'm obsessed with. Circe, loved, reread it not recently, probably years ago at this point. I reread it by audiobook, and I did love it a little more than when I read it for the first time. But Song of Achilles, because I read that probably at 17, 18, I sobbed at the ending. If we're comparing Madeline Miller books, Circe can't reach the emotional level that Song of Achilles did for me, even if it probably is better. It's not just watching two boys hanging out in a tent for 20 years. Loveless by Alice Oseman for me. Oh, it matches the Think About It All the Time. It probably is I Think About It All the Time. But this was like the first major asexual or aromantic asexual book that like hit the mainstream. And as an aro ace myself, reading this book felt like reading my own diary. Every page was a personal attack, and I love it so dearly I cannot talk about it. Out of Love by Hazel Hayes is a love story told in reverse. So the first chapter is the characters break up, or like the month after they break up, and as you progress through the story, it circles back to the moment they met. And the only reason I bought this book is it's like an adult romance, which is not something I read, and I didn't read in 2021. It's just not something that speaks to me, but I bought this because I love Hazel Hayes, the YouTuber. And anytime someone branches out into being an author, I want to support them. I've bought many a YouTube book in my life. And I like this more than I was expecting. It probably is like a safe 4 stars. I imagine if I read it now, I might like it a little bit more now that I'm slightly older and closer to... I'm not even close to the age of the characters still. But I'm older than a teenager. I might relate to it more. But I liked it the first time. I think I'd like it now. Teeth by Hannah Moscovitz. You are immediately going into books of all time. This is a book I've made a video on this channel about it and a blog post, but it was so long ago I had like a very old thumbnail sign. It's in like black and white, you can't tell what you're looking at. But Teeth is about a boy who is forced to move with his family to this like remote isolated island because his little sister she might have cystic fibrosis, she has like something wrong with her, but the fish at this island have magical healing properties, so people come here and just like live here to survive off the fish. And Rudy's not having it. He's this teenager in this community of mostly like elderly people. He's isolated. And then he meets this little merman, this little fish boy, who's an absolute little bitch. And I love him. And I think it had like a tragic ending. And it's so atmospheric because it's this cold, wintry island. And it's obviously by the beach. And it just feels, Southwest England in winter. It felt like home. But that's a book of all time. And I think about it often. Some Kind of Happiness also goes into I Think About It Often. This is a middle grade book. I'm having flashbacks because again this is the kind of middle grade book that would inspire the kind of things I want to write. Where there's a girl, she's like is she living with her cousins? She has anxiety, but she has this like fantasy world. It might be like a story she's writing. It might be just a world in her head, but the chapters kind of like alternate her in the real world being like anxious and sad, and her in her fantasy world where she's like brave and courageous and fighting monsters. And can't remember enough to talk about it. Don't remember if I made a review about it, but I do think about it often because it has the kind of like Seven by Taylor Swift kind of vibe. It's in its folklore era. The Bone Houses by Emily Lloyd Jones is also I Think About It Often. It is my favourite Emily Lloyd Jones book that I have read, which is, the 3 Welsh folklore ones. The Bone Houses, The Drowned Woods, The Wild Huntress, and then she has some middle grade ones. Unseen Magic, Unspoken Magic, there might be another one. Love those as well. A great example of middle grade books for me. But The Bone Houses is my favourite because mostly in a forest, just the 2 main characters, one of which has chronic pain, and just this like very quiet, heartfelt, dark and sad adventure. It speaks to me a lot. House of Hollow probably should be in I Think About It Often, because I do think about it quite often, and it has inspired scenes in my book Paper Forests. But it's probably going to be 4 stars, because I reread it recently. No, it's not better at 17, because I still really enjoyed it. But I think it's enjoyable the first time round because you don't know the plot twists. The second time I could appreciate it more because I could see like the foreshadowing and the setup for the plot twists. But some of the appeal had like worn off a little tiny, a minute bit. Small Favours by Erin A. Craig. Was gonna say it's my favourite Erin A. Craig book. I've literally read House of Salt and Sorrows, which did change my life, but it's not my favourite Erin A. Craig book. Small Favours is like a Rumpelstiltskin retelling set in like this small folky town with a lot of superstitions, and I think about book of all time. I'm actually quite... No, we're going to go book of all time. No, I lied. Think about it often. So think about it often. And again, it's a book that will be deeply inspirational to something I write someday. Something which might be my kind of like loose Frankenstein reimagining. But who's to say? Because I love a folklore, a fairy tale, just any kind of story retelling. And Rumpelstiltskin was kind of a niche one. And again, the Rumpelstiltskin references are kind of... It's abstract at best, but I see it. And I love it. The Honeys is the kind of book that I would have to reread to like fully... Where does it go? Oh, it's got dubbed here. It probably is 4 stars. Because I think when I read it, I was reading it on the train to, I believe, Torquay to see seagulls. I had a paperback copy. It was special to me because it was the first book I bought at my uni bookshop, which is Falmouth Bookseller. I love them very dearly. But I think it's got like some more nostalgia value. But this is probably this book might be what like committed me to like, yeah, why horror is like my genre. Because you can kind of see in my upcoming reads the horror influence coming in a bit more. Definitely had a defining impact on my life. I don't quite think about it often because again, it's a case of... Similar to Hull Back the Tide, I've read a lot more books in the genre since then that I love more. But this one has a special place in my heart. And I do really love it, and I can't wait. I think it's getting like a TV or a film adaptation. Can't wait for that. I'm so excited for that. Lake Law. This is a kind of book where, in theory, I think about it often. Because I scroll through my top reads list a lot, but I think about it often because I can't remember anything about it. I remember enjoying it. I imagine if I reread it now, I would probably think it's better at 17. But it's about 2 non-binary teenagers. And there's like, is it like a secret world under a lake? I really couldn't elaborate. I think I had an advanced reader copy. And I think for The Girl Underneath the Sea, I had an advanced reader copy as well. But I also can't remember that one. Except The Girl Beneath the Sea, I remember absolutely beautiful writing and storytelling. Could not tell you a single thing about the plot other than the girl goes beneath the sea. Couldn't tell you. The Kings of Nowhere by C.G. Drews is the Patreon-exclusive sequel to The Boy Who Steals Houses, focusing more on the main character Sam's brother while he is away in juvie, and I think about it often. Jeremy Delaney is one of my favourite contemporary characters of all time. I love his anxiety and his humour and his softness despite how many harsh things get thrown at him. I love his and Avery's like very reluctant relationship. I love the autism representation, especially as it's like, first of all, not like your stereotypical classic autism representation, and it's also not very positive because it shows characters having meltdowns and fighting people and obviously just being what many would consider a terrible person, but it's just another side to representation that we don't usually see for autism, and I love it and it means a lot to me. Unraveller by Frances Hardin, straight up to books of all time. Favourite Frances Hardin book. I've not read a huge amount, but this, Deep Light, I think was also on here because I read it the same year and I'm obsessed with it. I ultimately chose Unraveller as my favourite because it's a book that if I think about for too long, I could probably just cry about it. So many elements of it are influential to me in every project that's upcoming. The concept is so unique to me and the cover is just beautiful. I think I had an advanced reader copy for this and it absolutely changed my life because with advanced reader copies, sometimes it's hard to know what you're going to get ahead of time because you are purely basing it on like cover and description. Not like when a book's been out for a while, I can look through the reviews and see what people think about it. I am just purely picking it because I think, that'd be exciting. So it's so rare that I pick something and it actually does like change my life. What the River Knows. I also had an advanced copy for this, and I did finish it and review it just in time, so then it became the Owl Crate. Was it an Owl Crate or was it Loom Crate? It was everywhere at the time. I think I got it as like an Owl Crate edition. And it's absolutely stunning, and I'm so glad I loved it because I was getting it in the box. I don't think about it often, but it's an incredible book. It's like a 4.5 star rating for me because I love Egyptian mythology so much, and I can't even... Where are my Egypt books? They're in here somewhere. I don't know where my Egypt books are anymore, but it just like struck a chord. It reminded me of being like a little girl and reading the shiny gold Egypt books, and I loved it so much. 4.5 stars, but I don't think about it that often. I really need to read a sequel though, and maybe that'll change my perspective a bit, but I do love it a lot. These Violent Delights by Meeting Them River, immediately up to books of all time. I don't know what about it hits me so much. I was going to say it's dark academia. No, I can't call every book that has education and dark academia. But it is two boys who meet. They, in theory, should hate each other, but they look at each other and think, you're the only person here who is my intellectual equal. And they start to have this, like, very obsessive, undying, not even love, it's literally obsession with each other. And they think, how can I prove to you that I love you more than you love me? And they start scheming of, can they get away with murder? How they got to that conclusion? Can't remember, but this book, it's the writing about it, and it's like the very quiet moments shown in their relationship that speak to me. This book is mine. Our Wives Under the Sea could be a book of all time. This is probably like my first foray into, is it literary? It's got a little horror influence. There's sea creatures. I love sea creatures. I love a mystery. I might have teared up and cried at the ending. It resonated with me very strongly on an emotional level. But I don't think it's a book of all time. I don't really think about it often. It's 4 stars. It is 4 stars. It is 4 stars. Divine Rivals I talked about probably literally last week by the time this is uploaded, about how I reread it recently and I enjoyed it more than the first time. Because if I was making this video 2 months ago, I didn't read it 17, I'd probably give it 4 stars. I'm probably still going to give it 4 stars because despite rereading it, I enjoy it more than I did the first time around. But it hasn't breached containment into like my daily thoughts. But I do really love it. Now these books are harder, these final 6, or final 5. What Lies in the Woods is 4 stars. One of my favourite Kate Alice Marshall books, but like not the favourite, and I don't think about it daily. I think I read it, I thought, that was a really good book, I love it, and then I moved on to a Kate Alice Marshall book that I love more. Also, What Lies in the Woods is the only one I can find in this country to buy, to read. It's the only one I own, which is quite sad. But these final 5, because I've read them so recently, there's a lot of recency bias in this list. But Nettle and Bone is a book of all time. It really is. I've talked about it I read it January 2024. I think I made a video mentioning it every single month in 2024. I love this book that much. These like dark fairy tale, it's not a fairy tale retelling, just got a fairy tale vibe. It has like a little hint of cannibalism. Somehow has a very strong found family vibe. And it's this group of like ragtag misfits teaming up to go kill the main character's sister's evil husband. It's wonderful. And A Study in Drowning, I think over time, well right now I think about it often because I'm about to embark on writing a book that this will be a comparison title for. And I think A Study in Drowning, there are many books again I read in 2024 and I'm planning to read this year in 2025 that have been compared to A Study in Drowning. Also, this is specifically the very beautiful Owl Crate cover, which is iridescent and stunning and perfect. Not quite a book of all time, but I think if I wasn't planning on writing this book, and if I hadn't read it so recently that I still had fun thoughts, and if pretty much every book coming out is compared to it, it might just be 4 stars, but it is, whether or not by choice, is taking up a lot of my brain space, this week specifically. Then Don't Let the Forest In by C.G. Drews is probably, I think about it often. So I do think about it as often as The Kings of Nowhere by C.D. Drews, but for like completely different reasons. Kings of Nowhere is a YA contemporary. Don't Let the Forest In is a horror. And I have gushed about Don't Let the Forest In a lot in 2024. And C.D. Drews' next book, Hazelthorn, I think again is another horror coming out at the end of this year, might be October 2025. And I imagine it's just going to be better than Don't Let the Forest In. Because as much as I love that one, the more you write things, the more you improve. So I'm so excited for this book. And if I don't get approved for the arc, I will be breaking down the doors at NetGalley. Icarus. You could have probably put every single K.N. Crumb book on this list, but Icarus is as solid. I think about it often. So I do think about it often. I read it recently, I adored it. It hasn't changed my life as much as The Wicked King did. But I imagine if I, sat down today, read every single K.N. Crumb book back to back and had them fresh in my mind, this ranking would be different. Icarus might rank higher, because again, it's newer, it's many years later. Kei Yankum's craft has improved so much, and I love there's intersex representation, there's the, oh my gosh, the joint, there's some kind of like chronic pain and chronic illness representation. It speaks to me more on a personal level, but it doesn't have that the obsessive, delirium, codependent relationship of the Wicked King, which ultimately hits me. But I believe my favourite Kei Yankum book may actually be The Weight of Stars, which has not made this list at all. And that's a whole other video. Finally, I Hideous Progeny by C. McGill. Do I think about it often? This book is kind of like, it's a Frankenstein kind of reimagining. It's kind of a sequel, maybe like 100 years after Frankenstein. Or not 100 years. It's about Frankenstein, Dr. Frankenstein's niece or great niece, discovering his notes and trying to recreate the bringing something to life thing with her husband to prove herself to this Victorian society that she is a respectable scientist. And she creates this kind of like sea turtley. They basically try and create a dinosaur. It's like this sea turtley creature, and I'm so fond of this creature. But do I think, like, the second I put this book down, it was all I thought about for a week straight. I thought it was going to be like my favourite book of all time. But now reflecting, I think it's 4 stars. And that is the tier list of my favourite reads of all time. I'm quite happy with that. If you've read any of these books, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts are. If you've read enough of them, because I think some of them might be quite niche picks. If you read enough of them to have strong feelings on this list, or where I've ranked them, argue it out. Or based off this lovely selection here. If you think you have a good enough, description of my reading taste, give me some recommendations. What do you think I'd like, and will it be a book of all time for me? Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. This was a bit different for me, I quite liked it. And I hope to see you next time. Bye.